My boss stole the company I built at my own kitchen table, put his name across the front of it, and stood on a stage in downtown Nashville with my work glowing on a screen 20 feet tall behind him, and I sat in the fourth row and let him finish every single slide. Hold on 1 second before I get into it, because I owe you a thank you for clicking on this. So here's the deal I make with everybody. Put your city down in the comments, wherever you're sitting right now, and I'll say a whole batch of them out loud at the top of the next story. I do it every time. And if you can spare a like, if you can hit subscribe, that's the only reason somebody like me gets to keep sitting down and telling these. Okay. So, 11 months before that stage, I was in a glass conference room on the fourth floor of an office building off West End Avenue, and my boss slid one sheet of paper across the table and put his finger on the signature line. His name is Boyd Kessler, chief executive of a healthcare software outfit called Ardmore Clinical Solutions. 47 years old, quarter-zip pullover in October, that specific tan you get from golf and not from work. He had a habit of saying your name at the front of every sentence like he was calming down a horse. He goes, "Delia, we've got an ownership question to clean up." I looked at the paper, invention assignment, retroactive. Every line of it pointed at a thing called Crossfill, which was mine, which I built at night in my kitchen in East Nashville on a laptop I paid for, on servers I paid for, out of my own checking account. I said, "Boyd, Ardmore has nothing to do with Crossfill. Nothing. Not 1 hour, not $1. And he smiled at me. This real patient smile. He goes, "Delia, you're a healthcare software engineer at a healthcare software company, and you built healthcare software. I don't think you understand how that reads." I said I wasn't signing it. He leaned back, hands behind his head, and said, "Delia, I want to make this easy on you. 2%, Vice President of Product. We fold it in, build it outright, and you get to see the thing succeed instead of running it out of a spare bedroom like a hobby. 2% of my own thing." I said no. And this is where his face changed. Hear it the way he said it, because I have thought about it probably 4,000 times since. He goes, "Delia, you can be right, or you can be employed. I've done this a lot longer than you have. I did not sign anything that afternoon. What I did do, driving home over the river with my hands shaking so bad I had to pull into a gas station on Main Street, was call a man named Yusuf Adeyemi. Boyd Kessler did not know Yusuf existed. That was the first thing he didn't know about what he was walking into. There were others, and one of them was going to take his whole company down, but I didn't know that yet either. My name is Delia Ward. I'm 34, grew up in Cookeville, about an hour and a half east of Nashville, up Interstate 40. My mom is Charlene. She's had type 1 diabetes since she was 9 years old. In the fall of 2022, my mother could not get her insulin. I don't mean she couldn't afford it. That's a different story, and everybody's heard that one. I mean the pharmacy she'd used for 19 years, a little independent on the square with a bell over the door, just did not have it. Back-ordered. The pharmacist, Mr. Gentry, a man who put a sucker in my hand every time I walked in there as a kid, got on the phone and started calling around, and I sat in a plastic chair by the blood pressure machine and listened. 7 places off a legal pad, one at a time, like it was 1984. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, there is a pharmacy 11 miles from here with exactly what she needs on a shelf. And the only reason we don't know that is nobody built the thing that would tell us. So I built the thing that would tell us. I called it Crossfill, a private network for independent pharmacies to see each other's short-dated and overstocked inventory and move it between themselves before it expired, or before somebody's mom went 4 days without insulin. Pharmacies are allowed to transfer between each other. They do it all the time. They just do it by phone off a legal pad, exactly like Mr. Gentry did, because the big chains have systems for this and the little guys have nothing. I worked on it for 14 months, and it was not glamorous. Me at my kitchen table with a bowl of cereal at 11 at night, 7 nights a week, Cat on the router because it was warm. Me driving out to Lebanon and Dixon on Saturdays to watch how a back office actually did its ordering, getting told no about 9 times before somebody said yes. I set up an LLC, Bellwether Labs, filed it myself with the Tennessee Secretary of State, paid the fee on my own debit card, opened a business account at a credit union on Gallatin Pike, every server bill through it. I registered the trademark too, Crossfill Wordmark, filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office under Bellwether Labs. And because Crossfill touches prescription data, every single pharmacy that came on had to sign a business associate agreement with me. That's a HIPAA thing. Handle protected health information for a covered entity. You sign a contract saying exactly what you can do with it and who you are. 11 pharmacies signed those. 11. Every one of those agreements says Bellwether Labs LLC at the top, my name on the signature line, and nowhere on any of those pages does the word Ardmore appear. And Yusuf Adeyemi was a doctoral student in biomedical informatics at Vanderbilt, and he wrote the matching engine, the actual guts of the thing, the part that decides which pharmacy gets which box and how fast it has to move before it turns into garbage. I could not have written it. I'm a good engineer, and that man is something else entirely. I paid him out of the Bellwether account. $4,000, every dollar I had that month, plus a handshake that when it was worth something, he'd get a real piece. We never signed an intellectual property assignment. Never. It didn't occur to me. He was a friend of a friend from a meetup at a taproom on Charlotte Avenue, and I was a woman with a spreadsheet and a dream. That gap right there is the whole story. Boyd Kessler never knew it existed. Neither did I, not in the way that mattered. Not yet. Now, how did he find out about Crossfill in the first place? Preston Wick. Preston was 26, junior engineer on my team, and I mentored that kid, sat with him after hours, went to bat for him when the platform director wanted him cut. When his car got towed off Demon Brunn, I paid the $200 and something and told him to forget it. I demoed Crossfill to him on my own laptop at a Mexican place on Eastland because I was proud of it, and he asked and I wanted somebody to be excited with me. 3 weeks later, I noticed Preston getting very friendly with Boyd. Coffee runs. Golf, suddenly from a kid who thought golf was for his uncles. Then came the conference room and the piece of paper. I did not sign it on a Tuesday. The following Monday, at 9:40 in the morning, my badge did not open the 4th floor door. I swiped it 3 times like an idiot while people walked around me. And then June Ashby came out. June was the office manager, 61 years old, been at Ardmore since it was 9 people over a bakery, kindest face, and the coldest filing system in the state of Tennessee. She goes, "Honey, come with me." She took me to the small conference room, the one with no glass. Boyd was already in there. So was Dale Ferris, the chief financial officer, who was also Boyd's brother-in-law. Boyd goes, "Delia, we're separating." It's a performance thing. A performance thing. I had a review from 6 weeks earlier calling me the strongest technical hire of the last 4 years. It was in my email. I still have it. I said, "Boyd, you know exactly what this is." And Dale Ferris, a man shaped like a mailbox, slides a folder at me and says, "The separation includes 8 weeks of pay, signed by Friday." I flipped it open. Page 6 had an acknowledgement that all work product created during my employment, regardless of time, place, or resources used, belonged to Ardmore Clinical Solutions. I closed the folder, pushed it back, said no thank you. June Ashby walked me down to my car with my little box, 2 plants, a mug, a framed picture of my mom. In the parking garage she stopped, looked at me, and said, "Real quiet, Delia. I've been printing things." I said, "What?" She said, "I've been at this company 19 years and I know what a paper trail is. You call me when you've got a lawyer." Then she patted my arm and went back inside like she'd told me about the weather. Okay, so here's where it turns. And I'll be honest, my first reaction was not strength. It was 3 days on my couch eating off a plate I never washed, watching a home renovation show I don't even like, feeling like the stupidest woman in Davidson County. What got me up was my mother calling to ask if I was okay, me lying to her about it, and then hearing her check her sugar on the other end of the line, that little beep, and something in me went cold and clean. 10 days later they came at me the first time. Certified letter. Cease and desist from a firm in the Gulch, signed by a man named Bill Hargett. Crossville was Ardmore's property. Turn over all source code and credentials. Stop operating within 7 days. It cited my employment agreement, it cited a non-compete, and it used the phrase irreparable harm about 6 times. I read that letter standing at my mailbox and got so dizzy I sat down on the curb. But that letter was not the real hit. The real hit came 8 days after. I had an offer. Good one. Company out in Cool Springs, principal engineer, more money than Ardmore ever paid me. Verbal offer. Written offer coming Monday, I'd already told my mother. Monday the recruiter called and her voice was doing that thing where somebody's reading a script. She goes, "Delia, we're going to pause on this wreck." I said, "Did somebody call you?" 4 seconds of silence, and then she said, "I really can't get into it, and I want you to know I'm sorry." And she hung up. Boyd Kessler had known their chief technology officer for 15 years. The man's name was sitting right there on Ardmore's advisory page. So now I'm unemployed, being sued in advance, with a mortgage. Second week of November. Have you ever had a month where you can actually feel your life bending under you? And then he did the thing that told me exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. He went after Yusuf. I found out because Yusuf texted me a screenshot at midnight. Boyd had emailed him directly, out of nowhere, addressed him as Mr. Adeyemi, and offered $8,000 for a, quote, letter of understanding regarding prior contract work. $8,000. For the engine he built over 5 months while writing his dissertation. Yusuf called me the next morning, and I could hear his kettle going. He goes, "Delia, why is this man emailing me?" I said, "Because he thinks you're a loose end." He was quiet a second, and then said something I think about a lot. He said, "My father is a pharmacist in Ibadan. He asked me last year what my American software does. I said it moves medicine to where medicine is missing. Should I tell him I sold that for $8,000? I said, "Yusuf, I can't pay you what he can." He said, "I know. Do not offer." First, I did the thing you're supposed to do. Hired a real firm. Big lobby, art on the walls, a partner named Chip Aldridge, who wore a pocket square and talked about vigorous defense. $22,000 retainer, my whole emergency fund, gone in one wire. 6 weeks later, his paralegal called on a Thursday and said the firm had a conflict and would be withdrawing. Ardmore had put another of that firm's healthcare partners on retainer 3 weeks earlier, which conflicted them right out of my case. When I asked what happened to my money, she said most of it had been billed against. $19,000 and change for 6 weeks of a man in a pocket square telling me we would be aggressive. And then, because the universe wasn't done, Bill Hargett filed first. Declaratory judgment action in Davidson County Chancery Court, Ardmore Clinical Solutions versus Delia Ward and Bellwether Labs, LLC, asking the court to declare everything was theirs. They served me at my apartment door on a Saturday morning while I stood there holding a coffee. 2 weeks later, his office sent a settlement offer. $35,000, a full assignment of Crossville to Ardmore, and a confidentiality provision that would have made it illegal for me to tell you this story. And listen, I want to tell you, I laughed at it. I didn't. I sat at that same kitchen table where I built the whole thing, got out a pen, put my hand on the signature line, and sat there for probably 40 minutes. $35,000 would have caught up my mortgage, paid back my parents, and let me go be a person again. You know what stopped me? My mom called. Not about any of it. Her pharmacy had gotten some blood pressure medication in for my aunt through a swap, and she goes, "Delia, they said your little program found it in Lebanon." My little program. Still running. 11 pharmacies were still using it. The servers were still on because I was still paying for them out of an account with $430 in it. I put the pen down. Then I did the thing I should have done first, which was ask a pharmacist. I called Mr. Gentry in Cookville and said, "Do you know a lawyer?" And he said his niece's husband's sister did patents in East Nashville, and she was, quote, mean as a snake. Renata Sipes. Solo practice, second floor above a bike shop on Woodland Street. One paralegal and a coffee maker older than Preston Wick. She read the cease and desist, the complaint, and my employment agreement while I sat there. About 20 minutes, and she did not make one comforting noise the whole time. Then she put it down and said, "All right. Tell me who wrote the code." I said, "Mostly me." She said, "Mostly." I said, "Well, the matching engine, that was a contractor." Yusuf. She sat up, physically sat up in her chair. She goes, "Did he sign an assignment?" I said, "No." She goes, "Did he sign anything?" I said, "An invoice." And Renata Sipes closed her eyes for a second, like a woman hearing her favorite song come on. She said, "Delia, listen carefully. Under federal copyright law, when an independent contractor writes software for you, and there's no signed agreement assigning it, that contractor owns his copyright. Software is not one of the categories that automatically becomes a work made for hire. Ardmore can argue all day that your employment agreement swallowed your ideas. Let them. Your contractor was never their employee and never signed a thing with them. So if they're running that engine, and they are, they're copying a work they have no rights to at all." Then she asked about the pharmacies, and I told her about the 11 business associate agreements with Bellwether Labs on them. She walked to her window and looked out at the bike shop a while. She goes, "Are those pharmacies' patient records currently flowing through Ardmore's system?" I said if he moved the customers over, they'd have to be. She said, "Well, he can't have done that." "Nobody's that dumb. He was that dumb. He'd signed exactly none of them over and told the pharmacies it was a platform upgrade. Here's the other piece. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, which means I can record a conversation I'm part of." Renata said, "Will he take a call from you?" I said, "That man cannot help himself." So in January, I called Boyd Kessler and did the worst acting of my life, told him I was struggling and might be willing to talk. And Boyd, who could not resist being the biggest man in any room, even when the room was a phone call, said this. He said, "Delia, being right is a luxury good. We both know where it came from, but you've got a mortgage and I've got a legal budget, and that's the whole conversation." Then he said, the one that ended him. He said, "By the time this gets in front of a judge, Crossville will be 4% of a company doing $40 million in a raise, and nobody unwinds that. $40 million in a raise." He'd just handed me the clock, and he'd said all of it into a phone in a state where I'm allowed to hit record, which I had the whole time, sitting at my kitchen table with a little app running and my heart going like a rabbit. Because that's what Boyd wanted. That was the whole reason for any of it. Ardmore had been flat for 3 years, and he needed a story to tell investors. And he had a term sheet in motion with a fund called Alder Creek Partners out of Atlanta. He wanted that round more than he wanted air. Okay. Now the stage. The Southeast Pharmacy Technology Summit, Music City Center, the second week of March. Boyd was doing a keynote. Ardmore had a booth the size of my apartment. I bought a ticket, $180 on a credit card, with Renata telling me it was pointless, and me telling her I did not care. I sat in the 4th row. He came out in a blazer with no tie and told the room a story about his grandmother in Pulaski who couldn't get her heart medication. His grandmother. He said the words, and I made a noise out loud, and the woman next to me turned and looked at me. Then the slide came up. Ardmore Relay. That's what he renamed it. Same interface, same green. Same little icon of 2 hands passing a box that I drew myself at 1 a.m. with my cat on the router. And down in the bottom corner of the demo screen, because Preston Wick was not good enough to strip it out, was a string, a build tag, 6 characters, the initials of my mother, Charlene Ward, and the year she was diagnosed. I put it in there in the first month and never took it out. He finished. Applause. Somebody asked how they handled data agreements with the pharmacies, and Boyd said, And I quote, "We've got all that squared away. It's very buttoned up." Afterward, there was a line to shake his hand, and I got in it. My legs were not working right. I got to the front. He looked at me, and there was a full second where he did not know what to do with his face. He goes, "Delia?" I said, "Your grandmother in Pulaski." He said, "Delia, don't do this here." I said, "Boyd, what does your build tag stand for?" He goes, "What?" I said, "The string. Bottom right of your demo. What does it stand for?" And he did not know. He had no idea. He had stood in front of 600 people and presented a product he could not read one line of. I said, "Ask Preston." And I walked out onto Korean Veterans Boulevard and threw up in a trash can by the crosswalk. Now, two things went wrong before anything went right. In April, Chancery Court heard Ardmore's motion on the employment agreement. Tennessee courts will enforce an invention assignment clause when the invention relates to the employer's line of business, and healthcare software is very much Ardmore's line of business. The Chancellor ruled Ardmore had a colorable claim to the concept and to the work I personally authored while employed there. I sat in that courtroom on 3rd Avenue, and my ears went hot, and I did not hear anything after. I went down to the parking garage, sat in my car on level 3, and cried so hard I gave myself a headache that lasted 2 days. Renata found me, got in the passenger side, and did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Delia, he owns a description of a thing." "He does not own the thing." I said, "That sounds like a fortune cookie." She said, "It's copyright law, and he'll find out." The second thing that went wrong was worse because it was human. Yusuf went quiet. 11 days. I texted, I called, nothing. And I found out later why. Bill Hargett's firm had sent him a letter suggesting he might have personal exposure, that he might have improperly used university resources, that this could become a visa matter. They scared a doctoral student with a visa. And on top of that, Preston Wick had gone through Ardmore's systems and deleted the access logs from the shared drive, the ones that would have shown when he pulled my build and where it went. Renata told me on the phone, flat, "No cushion, the logs are gone." I said, "So that's it." She said, "That's one road closed." Then the road opened, and it opened from 3 sides at once, fast, and I got to watch it happen. It started with June Ashby. June called me on a Sunday afternoon from her car in a church parking lot in Hermitage, and she said, "Honey, remember I told you I'd been printing things?" Ardmore had filed a document with the court that supposedly carried my signature from my hire date. June had the original onboarding packet from 4 years earlier in a paper file in a cabinet, because June Ashby is 61 and does not trust a scanner. They were not the same document. The clause about work product, regardless of time, place, or resources, did not exist in the version I signed. Somebody had built a new file and moved my signature page onto it, and the name and the file properties in the metadata with a creation date 11 days after I was walked out of the building was Dale Ferris, Chief Financial Officer, brother-in-law. When Renata got that file, she called me at 7 in the morning, and all she said was, "Delia, they made a new document." Then Yusuf came back. Day 12, he showed up at Renata's office above the bike shop, just showed up, in a rain jacket, holding a folder. He sat down and said, "I spoke to my father." Renata said, "And?" He said, "My father asked me one question. Is the woman telling the truth?" I said, "Yes." He said then, "There is nothing to discuss. This is not complicated. People make it complicated because they are afraid." He signed the assignment right there. Everything he'd written transferred to Bellwether Labs for a real ownership stake and $1 on the paper. Renata recorded it with the Copyright Office along with the registration for the engine. So as of that Tuesday in May, I owned the copyright in the matching engine outright, and Ardmore was running it in production at a company about to close a $40 million round. And then the pharmacies did what pharmacies do, which is talk to each other. Renata drafted 11 letters. Not threats, just notice. Each one told an independent pharmacy owner, in plain English, that the business associate agreement protecting their patients' data was held by Bellwether Labs, that it was never assigned to Ardmore, and that their protected health information appeared to be sitting with an entity that had no agreement in place. Mr. Gentry called me 40 minutes after he got his. He said, "Delia, honey, are you telling me my patient's records are sitting on some fellow's computer in Nashville with no paperwork?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, I'll be." "Who do I call?" I said, "You might call whoever's giving the money." He did. So did 4 others. And that's how Hollis Rayner from Alder Creek Partners ended up on the phone with me on a Thursday morning in June. She asked me to send documents: the trademark registration, the copyright registration and recorded assignment for the engine, the 11 business associate agreements with Bellwether Labs on the front, the bank statements showing every server payment out of my own account, time-stamped, going back to before I was ever hired. Then she went quiet for 4 days. On the 5th day, Renata got a call from Bill Hargett's office asking whether we'd consider mediation. She said, "I'll ask my client," hung up, looked at me and said, "They're bleeding." Mediation was in a building on Church Street with terrible carpet, 2 rooms, 1 mediator, a retired judge with reading glasses on a chain. Boyd came in like he was buying the place. Same blazer, Dale Ferris beside him, Bill Hargett with a rolling cart of binders. The mediator put us in separate rooms and went back and forth. First offer from their side was $90,000 and an assignment. Renata sent back 1 page listing 5 things: the copyright registration in the engine, and the fact that Ardmore was running it, the trademark, the 11 business associate agreements, the metadata report on the document Dale Ferris created, and at the bottom, 1 line noting we had a recording of Mr. Kestler made lawfully under Tennessee law discussing the origin of the product and the timing of the raise. The mediator took that page down the hall. He was gone 18 minutes. When he came back, his face had changed. He said, "Miss Ward, Miss Sipes, they'd like to talk in the same room." We went in. Bill Hargett was not looking at anybody. Dale Ferris looked like a man in an airport who has just realized which gate he is at. Boyd goes, "Delia, let's be adults," Renata said. "My client isn't going to speak, but I am." And she set her phone flat on the table and pressed it once, and the room filled up with Boyd's own voice. From January, tinny off the little speaker saying being right is a luxury good, saying we both know where it came from, saying Crossville will be 4% of a company doing $40 million in a raise, and nobody unwinds that. Nobody moved. I watched Dale Ferris's face while it played, and that was the moment I understood I'd won. He put his hand flat on the table, real slow, like he was steadying a boat. When it got to the 40 million part, he closed his eyes. Renata clicked it off. Then she goes, "Mr. Ferris, I'd like to ask you about a PDF." And Dale Ferris, Chief Financial Officer, brother-in-law, the man who built a fake document and handed it to a court, opened his mouth, and his lawyer put a hand on his arm before anything came out. Didn't matter. His face had already answered. Boyd turned and looked at him. First time all day Boyd didn't have a word ready, and Dale would not look back. Boyd tried to climb back on top of it. He said, "Delia, I built a real business. I have 41 employees. You want to blow that up over ego?" And I broke the rule, and I spoke, and Renata let me. I said, "Boyd, do you know what a build tag is yet?" He didn't answer. I said, "You told 600 people about your grandmother in Pulaski. My mother is in Cookville. She's alive. She has type 1 diabetes, and she went 4 days without insulin while a man read 7 phone numbers off a legal pad. That's your grandmother. She's my mother." He said, "This is exactly why you were never going to make it in this business." And Renata said, "The offer expires at 5. Here's what it cost him." Alder Creek pulled the term sheet the following Monday, and I know exactly how, because Hollis Rayner called me herself, which she did not have to do. She goes, "Delia, I'm going to be straight with you, because I think you've earned straight. I sat in a room this morning with your document and Ardmore's document side by side. And then she said the thing I've kept. The man told me the data agreements were, quoting his own email to me, very buttoned up. He used the same phrase to a room of 600 people. He did not have a single one of them. I said, "So you're out." She said, "I'm out of Ardmore." Then, "Call me in 90 days. And she hung up. Without the round, Ardmore had a burn problem and a board with 2 outside directors who had just learned about the metadata at the same time as everybody else. The settlement, the parts I can talk about, gave me everything back. Crossville came home to Bellwether Labs. Ardmore Relay was shut down and every copy destroyed under a certification. They paid. I can't tell you the number, but my mortgage does not concern me. And Yusuf finished his doctorate without teaching 4 sections of undergraduate statistics. Now let me tell you what happened to the rest of them. Ardmore terminated Preston in July. And here's the part that gets me. When Renata deposed him, we found out the logs he deleted did not matter, because 8 months earlier, Preston had emailed my entire build to his personal Gmail so he could look at it at home. That email was sitting in Ardmore's own system. He wiped the evidence in one place and had already copied it into another. He came to my apartment in August, stood on the landing in the rain, 27 now, and cried. He said, "He told me you were going to steal from the company and I'd be protecting everybody." I said, "Preston, I paid for your tow." He said, "I know." I said, "I know, you know." I did not scream at him, I just closed the door. He's in credentialing at a staffing agency out in Antioch now, and he'll be explaining that termination in job interviews for a long time. Dale Ferris resigned on a Friday. The reason is that Renata reported the fabricated document, and a lawyer's obligations there are not optional. There was an investigation, a finding, and Dale Ferris now has a thing attached to his name that shows up every time somebody runs him. His wife is Boyd's sister. I've been told Thanksgiving is a smaller event these days, and Bill Hargett. 2 weeks after mediation, his firm moved to withdraw as counsel. I sat in the gallery for that hearing because I wanted to see it. He stood up in front of the chancellor, said the words about irreconcilable differences and professional obligations, did not turn around, and walked out with his rolling cart making that noise on the tile. And Boyd. The board removed him as chief executive in September. Ardmore got bought for parts in the spring by a bigger outfit in Brentwood, which kept 12 of the 41 people, and that part does not feel good. Those 29 did nothing wrong. I saw him one time after. Kroger on Gallatin Pike, of all places, a Tuesday in the cereal aisle in a windbreaker. He said my name, "Delia. Then I hear you got funded." I had. Alder Creek wrote a check to Bellwether Labs in October, and Hollis Rayner sits on my board. I said, "We did." And he goes, "Listen, I could be useful to you. Advisory role part-time, I know these buyers." Standing there next to the Raisin Bran, I said, "No thanks, Boyd." And he said, "You know, I taught you a lot." And I said, "The only genuinely mean thing I said in the whole 2 years, and I'm not proud of it, and I'd say it again." I said, "Boyd, the only thing you taught me was to keep the receipts, and I already had." Then I bought my cereal and went home. Crossville is in 310 pharmacies now across Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama. Yusuf runs engineering. June Ashby retired, and then unretired to be my office manager because she said she was bored, and she still prints everything, and I have never once told her to stop. The thing I remember most about it ending is not the settlement or the check or the board meeting. It's a Saturday morning that October when it was finally quiet, and I sat on my back steps in East Nashville with coffee and my cat trying to eat a moth, and I noticed my shoulders were down, just down, sitting normal. I had been carrying them up by my ears for 2 years and never once felt them there. I called my mom. She was at the pharmacy on the square, picking up. "Look, I'm not going to hand you anything tidy here. Some of it still makes me angry when I let it. The company Boyd ran had good people in it, and a bunch of them lost jobs they didn't do anything to lose, and I don't get to feel clean about that. But if you're in the middle of something like this right now, hear me on one thing. The people who take from you are usually taking a story, the version they can tell, in a room. They almost never bother to understand the actual thing because understanding it is work, and Boyd never in his life did that kind of work. Keep the boring paperwork. Write down the dates. Be the person in the room who is annoyingly, unbearably careful because that person wins, and learn the names. The pharmacist, the office manager who prints everything, the quiet grad student in the rain jacket. The people who saved me were the ones nobody in that whole building ever bothered to learn. Anyway, drop your city down there before you go. I've got another one of these for you next time.